Good Friday evening to you for teleSUR. I'm Regan Devines in Caracas, Venezuela. Firstly, look at the headlines. Colombia's FARC put down the guns and pick up the books as the Latin American nation looks to the future. They say they've been contaminated with heavy metals from mining operations. Peruvians marched to Congress demanding answers. And OPEC's top executive arrested, facing allegations of corruption and bribery. The details on these stories and more now on From the South. Thank you for being here with us. FARC's leader Timoleon Jimenez, known as Timochenko, has ordered the guerrilla group to stop combat training and focus on political and cultural education instead. Timochenko announced this in a tweet addressed to the president of Colombia, Juan Manuel Santos, in which he said, quote, Juan Manuel Santos have ordered the structures of the FARC-EP to suspend military courses and dedicate themselves to political and cultural formation, end quote. It was the rebel leader's first tweet in nearly 3 years. And President Santos has accused former President Álvaro Uribe of purposely fomenting fear among Colombians about the peace deal. At Columbia University in New York, Santos said that Uribe's opposition to the peace process is driven by political interests. He added that, quote, Mr. Uribe does not support the peace process because he lives from manipulating fear and war is the best environment to generate fear, end quote. Colombia's government has agreed to publish the entire justice agreement reached last week with FARC guerrillas once it is completed. FARC representatives have been calling for the whole 18-page document to be made public to avoid distortions and misunderstandings that have circulated in the Colombian media. The government was reluctant, saying the text was still subject to change. Now they are at least partly yielding. They have at least partly yielded to the rebel group's demand.
I reiterate that it is a strong agreement to which the government does not have any doubts. There are no doubts about this agreement. That said, the agreement that was made public comes from a larger text, which has 75 points prepared by a group of lawyers. This text was signed by the head of the government delegation, while making a clear written statement by a manual entry in the text that this was a document which was still being prepared, an unfinished document.
This agreement will be inescapable precedent for the future conflict resolutions in the world, which from now on should effectively place victims at the heart of any agreement.
And the European Union has appointed a former Northern Ireland peace envoy to participate in the Colombian negotiations. Eamon Gilmore is a former Irish foreign minister who also participated in the peace process in Northern Ireland when Irish Republicans and the Irish Republican Army were resisting British rule. The talks led to the IRA ceasefire in 1994. Colombia's authorities have also informed that a wanted drug lord with a $5 million price tag on his head has been killed in a military operation. The U.S. had put a price on the head of Victor Megateo Navarro. He was a former guerrilla fighter accused of running a cocaine supply route along the Colombian-Venezuelan border.
I want to confirm that Victor Ramon Navarro, also known as Megateo, a member and leader of the EPL guerrilla and drug kingpin, perhaps the most important one in Colombia, with a several-decade-long criminal career who murdered and hurt people, was involved in corruption and torture, harassed farmers and whose influence reached our neighbor Venezuela, was killed yesterday in a military operation.
Colombia and Venezuela continue their talks of the border crisis. The defense ministers of the two countries met in the Colombian city of Santa Marta a month and a half after Venezuela closed its borders to prevent smuggling and paramilitary activity. This is the second ministers' meeting after the agreement, signed by Presidents Nicolas Maduro and Juan Manuel Santos, aimed to build a new border of peace. And moving to Mexico now, more details are emerging about the disappearance of the 43 students in Ayotzinapa. More with our correspondent Clayton Kahn.
After repeated requests were made to Mexico's Transparency Institute, known as the EFI, to make public Defense Department documents on last year's September police attack and forced disappearance of the Ayotzinapa students, the country's military made available some records on the attack, which points to the military having had extensive knowledge in real time of what was occurring to the students, to the point that the 43 were disappeared. Now, according to the documents that have identities blacked out, Mexico's Army and Marines were both present in the city of Iguala on the night of September 26, 2014, when municipal police intercepted and violently attacked the Ayotzinapa teacher training students. Various cables or reports indicate that the armed forces were aware of when the police stopped the students, opened fire, and detained the youth. The military also made contact with the students in a clinic where at least 25 were seeking treatment and aid. Now, according to the students present that night, the soldiers arrived, recognized they were students, took their photos, and left, denying to intervene in what was occurring. At this point, no information has been revealed of further participation of the military in the crime that has left the country shaken 1 year after it occurred. Yet organizations such as the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights are calling to interview the soldiers present. And the families and classmates of the missing 43 also demand that the military be further investigated. This is Clayton Kahn reporting for teleSUR here in Mexico City.
Protesters marched on the Peruvian Congress in Lima after trekking over 300 kilometers from their Andean province of Pasco. They arrived demanding medical attention for metal contamination from mining operations in central Peru. The protesters have walked for over 15 days from a region which has been used for mining since the Spanish colonized the nation. Complaints included stunted growth, loss of balance from lead, and arsenic poisoning. Brazil's President Dilma Rousseff has announced that she will cut up to 10 ministries out of the current 39 to reduce costs. This one day after she announced a reshuffling of her cabinet. Brazil is in the midst of its worst economic recession in decades, and experts expect its economy to shrink by 2.8% this year and inflation to rise to 9.46%. The planning minister is expected to inform about the scope of the proposal next week. He said that the move will save hundreds of millions of reals. Brazilian lawmakers have called for the resignation of the Speaker of the Brazil's lower house, Eduardo da Cunha, after Switzerland provided Brazilian prosecutors with details of Swiss bank accounts in his name. The right-wing senator who is pushing for the impeachment of President Rousseff is third in line of presidential succession. He has refused, though, to comment. Uruguay has granted licenses to 2 companies to commercially grow marijuana. It was also added that weed should be on sale in pharmacies by next year. Uruguay was the world's first country to legalize the cultivation and distribution of marijuana in an attempt to ruin drug gangs and also to collect tax revenue. The implementation has been slower than previously planned, with licenses originally meant to have been distributed last year. The Bolivian government has invited the Chilean foreign minister and a Hague representative to an interview on state TV to talk about Chile's position in regard to the ongoing maritime dispute between the 2 countries. Last week, The Hague ruled that it had jurisdiction over the case, in which Bolivia wants unfettered access to the Pacific Ocean, disappointed Chile, who had hoped the case would be dropped. An ambitious project to translate Bolivia's native language Aymara for Facebook is almost finished. A group of volunteers started the translations back in 2012 with the aim of getting it designated as a formal language on Facebook. By the end of this year, they will have translated 27,000 words from Spanish to Aymara, meaning that Facebook will look at giving it official status. Our correspondent Dimitri O'Donnell has the details from La Paz.
Towering over the city of La Paz is Mount Illimani, considered one of Bolivia's most sacred mountains. Named in Aymara, one of the native languages of Bolivia, it's a much-loved symbol for the indigenous people. But if you speak Aymara and want to have a chat on Facebook, you're limited because the social network doesn't class it as a full language. Now, a passionate group of unpaid volunteers from a group called Aki Aru, which means language of the people, are working to change that.
We're translating more than 24,000 words, and with 3 months more to go, we hope to finish all of the translations.
Facebook set the limit of 27,000 words, so Aymara could be considered a full language on the site. Translators often spend up to 10 minutes discussing how to translate just one word, and with thousands of new words to choose from, it takes a lot of time and patience to get right.
It's hard to translate some words, but we love Aymara language.
1.3 million people speak Aymara in Bolivia. The group says this project is a source of pride for Aymara speakers around the world.
They say, hey, that's my language. My parents speak that language. And so I want to learn or remember this language.
With just 3,000 words left to translate, they hope to finish the project by Christmas. Facebook says if the group can translate 90% of the Spanish words into Aymara, they will designate it as a formal language. This is good news for Bolivia's native Aymara speakers. Soon they could be choosing to kusawa, or like something they see, on the social network. Dimitri O'Donnell, teleSUR, La Paz.
Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the British Labour Party, has said that he is open to dialogue on the Malvinas Islands and has won praise from Daniel Filmus, Argentina's Secretary for Malvinas Affairs. Filmus said that Corbyn was a modern leader and that this would represent a step forward in British foreign policy. He added that the question over control of the island would remain even if the right-wing opposition, led by Mauricio Macri, were to win the presidential elections later this month. Hurricane Joaquin has hit the Bahamas Islands despite forecasts that said that the storm would have turned northward toward the U.S. East Coast. The Category 4 storm hit the islands with strong 130-mile-per-hour winds with wind gusts of 160 miles per hour. Many Bahamian residents said that they were caught off guard by Joaquin, which quickly intensified by Wednesday and hit the islands hard on Thursday. They expressed anger that they were not warned sooner of the hurricane. Reports are that Joaquin has now taken a northern trajectory, posing a significant flooding threat to eastern U.S. states. 4 people are dead, 200 to 300 are missing, and 40 houses have been buried. That's according to Guatemalan authorities after heavy rains caused a landslide in the village of El Cambro. Reports are that 32 people have also been injured in the disaster, and 43 people have already been moved to a shelter. We will keep an eye on these developments for you as rescue operations are ongoing. Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Nkosi Zana Dlamini Zuma, met with Cuba's interim foreign minister, Marcelino Medina, as part of a 5-day working visit to the island. During the visit, a memorandum of understanding between the African Union and Cuba was renewed. Dlamini Zuma, the first woman to lead the African body, thanked Cuba for its long-standing solidarity. And coming up after the break, thousands of Yemenis hit the streets to protest the airstrikes by the Saudi-led coalition. This and more coming up next.
That have marked the course of history. Productions designed in the English language and made for the English-speaking world. This is Documentary. Watch it on telesur.net/English. telesur, wherever the news, you'll be there.
Wherever the news, you'll be there.
Welcome back. Thanks for sticking with us. Diezani Alison Mariuke, president of OPEC, was arrested in London this Monday by British authorities. The UK's National Crime Agency arrested Alison Mariuke for crimes related to bribery and corruption. In the past few years, she's become a controversial figure in the oil industry, accused of reckless spending, mismanagement of the oil sector, and using millions of dollars in public funds to pay for personal items and private jets. Under her watch, Nigeria's state-owned oil company allegedly stole billions of dollars from state coffers. Russian and U.S. military commanders met to discuss this week's airstrikes by the Russian government in Syria that resulted in the deaths of at least 12 Islamic State members. Officials said that they attacked targets in Raqqa province, Aleppo, Idlib and Hama, where an ISIS command post and communication center, bunkers and weapons depots were destroyed. This follows the declarations of Russian President Vladimir Putin to work with Russian President Bashar al-Assad in fighting the Islamic State threat. And speaking at the UN General Assembly, Syria's Foreign Minister Walid al-Muallem said that airstrikes in Syria are likely to be ineffective when coordinated without the support of his government. He praised the approach of Russia's President Putin, who, in working with the Syrian government, and alluded to the idea that the US-led airstrikes in Syria will enjoy greater success if done in conjunction with Syrian authorities.
The announcement of the beginning of the Russian airstrikes in Syria, which came upon a request from the Syrian government and in coordination with it, is an effective participation and a support of Syrian efforts in combating terrorism. The so-called Arab Spring was only a spring for Israel and its secret and known allies, and it continues to attack Syria while the world watches, arms the terrorists and treats them at its hospitals.
Supporters of Yemen's Houthi group demonstrated in the streets on Ghadir today in protest against the attacks by the Saudi-led coalition. The last 6 months have seen numerous airstrikes by the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen in a bid to restore to power the ousted president Abdurabu Mansur Hadi to power. The fighting has resulted in the deaths of over 5,000 people. Most recently, an airstrike killed over 130 people at a wedding. Israeli police are now on the search for at least 2 Palestinian gunmen who they believe were responsible for a drive-by shooting that killed a Jewish man and his wife. Reports are that the couple was traveling between the settlements of Itamar and Elon, more with their 4 children, when the shooting occurred. The children were found in the vehicle unhurt. The European Union released a statement calling for justice for the killing. They also said that restraint was needed in the investigation so that the Israeli-Palestinian feud does not escalate. German Chancellor Angela Merkel, Russian President Vladimir Putin, French President François Hollande, Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko, as well as their respective foreign ministers met for a roundtable discussion in Paris to look at the East Ukraine conflict, which has left over 8,000 people dead. This follows last month's ceasefire, which monitoring groups say has been largely observed by pro-Russian rebels and Ukrainian forces. Russia's President Putin admitted that they are far from a solution to the conflict, but added that there are elements of the talks that boost confidence that the crisis can be overcome. And now look at other news-making stories across the globe.
One of the main presidential candidates in the next election in Burkina Faso has applauded the arrest of the coup leader there. Benwende Sankara held a press conference where he took an opportunity to speak about the effects of the failed week-long coup.
The coup is behind us, but there is a fallout which must be taken care of. The collateral damage of the coup was that people died. There were martyrs, there were many injured. Our country's economy has taken a massive hit, and also the electoral process has been damaged.
And the saga continues regarding the Volkswagen emissions scandal. The first Swiss criminal complaint against the carmaker was lodged on Thursday by 2 Swiss lawyers who represent a Swiss man. According to one of the lawyers, the main legal issue at stake is fraud. Thousands of people protested in Tokyo, Japan against President Shinzo Abe and his proposed security-related bills. The legislation will allow Japanese troops to be deployed abroad for the first time since 1945. Protesters say that the bills are unconstitutional. The city of Rome was full of hundreds of students as they marched to the Ministry of Education in protest against Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi's educational reforms. Teachers and their unions have also fiercely opposed the reforms. Italy has been ranked 26th out of 30 countries in education by the World Economic Forum in their 2015 report on competitive growth.
Welcome back. Amy Johnson was the first woman in the world to fly solo from Britain to Australia back in the year 1930. And now another British female pilot is seeking to mirror that historic flight. 53-year-old Tracy Curtis Taylor has already begun the first leg of her trip. She will fly some 13,000 miles across 23 countries before a planned arrival in Sydney, Australia in the first week of 2016. Curtis Taylor will make the trip in a vintage 1942 Boeing Stearman Spirit of Artemis.
Oh, look, this is a terrific privilege to be in this position because I'm in awe of what Amy did in 1930. When I read her own account of what she did, I almost break into a sweat. She nearly killed herself several times over. I mean, it was stacked against her, so the fact that she even survived it was really remarkable.
And this is not something you see every day. It's a new school opened by a Chinese zoo for snow monkeys. About 30 of the monkeys, also called Japanese macaques, are being taught tricks like stilt walking, somersaults, and even mathematics. The monkeys will reportedly be entered into the entertainment industry after their training is completed. And finally this evening, Mexico City is considered to be the capital of museums, with more than 180 dotting the city. Now the megalopolis is home to a new addition, the Cuatro Caminos Photo Museum, which is not only providing an exclusive space for Mexico's visual producers, but also a space for education and reflection on the contemporary reality of the country. Here is more now with Clayton Kahn.
With 200 visual producers, 398 photographs, and 86 videos, this may look like a high-end gallery, but in fact, it is Mexico City's newly inaugurated photo museum. Located in a working-class neighborhood, the Cuatro Caminos Museum seeks to do more than exhibit photos.
The intention of creating this space was for education, fundamentally for education, through exhibits, workshops, conferences, events, masterclasses, and everything else that has to do with the image.
With entry costing at about $1.77 and half that for students, the museum, founded by the well-known contemporary photographer Pedro Meyer, also seeks to celebrate the ever-evolving work of Mexico's visual producers.
What importance would I give it? Well, there are ways of learning about history, and ways of interpreting reality. And finally, photography is one of them.
One tendency the curators realized when organizing the inaugural exhibit was the underlying theme of violence in Mexico. Called The State of Things, the collection of work graphically expresses the country's ongoing human rights crisis. The proposal of one participating photographer is to confront the apparent normalcy of violence in the collective mindset.
There has been a public that has been educated to consume these types of images for many years. What I want to do with my photos is to produce a reflection on the violence.
Meanwhile, another of the authors believes that one of the fundamental roles of social photography is to provoke reflection and action, to communicate ideas through the image.
The feeling that a photo can encapsulate can be very strong, and obviously will not simply stay in where the photo is taken. Everyone will see it for the explosion of action and feeling.
With the ever-proliferation of the consumption and production of images through new technologies, the organizers of the Cuatro Caminos Museum hope to maintain a relevant node of reflection and analysis of not just images, but of their meanings and interpretations. Clayton Kahn, teleSUR, Mexico City.
And that's it for us this Friday evening. Please remember there is more on these and other stories on our website, telesurtv.net/English. Don't forget that. From our news teams in Quito, Ecuador, and right here in Caracas, Venezuela, for telesur English, I'm Regan Devines. Have a great weekend. We hope to see you on Monday.